Are Lizardmen finally BiS? Well, with the recent patch changes, Lizardmen have been given an additional 15% headshot damage reduction modifier. So, this calls for a re-evaluation of the Lizardmen. I'll be going through every tier from no gear to common gear, all the way up to full gear in HR, and explaining why I think Lizardmen is now viable. Alright, so let's start off with no gear. I'll be using a cleric for this example, but you can use any class. So, with no gear, if I go in, I've got 94.7 move speed and about 5 PDR. Hello. However, when I equip the lizard skin, my 5 PDR goes up to 12, and my move speed stays the same. No downside here. Plus, I'm getting 15% headshot reduction. Now, you might say, what if I find something in the dungeon? Let's take a mid-level helmet, like the Chappelle, which is not bad, and let's equip it. We're at 12 PDR, almost the exact same, just a 0.2% difference, and our move speed has gone down to 93%, right? Remember where we were before? We were at 94.7. That's a significant move speed difference, and our headshot reduction is 5% lower with the helmet on. Now, what do we gain with this? We gain 1 agility, which does not matter, because again, we lost a ton of move speed here. We gain 1% projectile damage reduction, which is negligible at 1%, and we gain 10 magic resistance. So, is that a good trade? I don't think so. In this situation, I'm gonna go Lizard. To help you better understand, I've listed all the stat differences here. Again, we're comparing a no-gear cleric who found a Chappelle in the ground versus a Lizardman. There are a lot of negatives here, but they're very minor and very tiny percentages, and most of them come from the -1 agility. Now, let's talk about normals gearing up with low gear. Specifically, poor and common grade gear. I've picked out white gear, it's better than poor gear, and we're going to do a bit of a test. Let's put this all on. We're almost in full plate, minus plate gauntlets, which I don't like, because they lower your move speed. And you'll see a common theme here. Move speed is very important in this game. Especially as a cleric, we're getting kited around all the time. But for every class, move speed is very important. So, let's check out our numbers here. We're at 83.3 move speed. It's pretty awful, in my opinion. And we're at 31.5% PDR, which is not bad. Now, we've got a Hound Skull. I see a lot of people running Hound Skull. It's pretty meta right now. I, as you can see, also run Hound Skull. However, let's compare it with the Lizard. Now, our move speed is 87.7, much better, and our PDR has gone down to 28.3. Now, is that worth it? Well, let's take a look at the stats side by side to get a better idea of what's going on here. So here are the stat pages all laid out in front of you, and I've put the differences on the right side. As a Lizardman, compared to Common Gear Hound Skull, you'll be getting 13 move speed. That is massive. That's like wearing epic quality Lightfoots with an additional 2 move speed on them. It's pretty good. Plus you're getting 1% MDR, magic damage reduction. But what are we losing? We're losing 3.2 PDR, we're losing 5% headshot reduction, 3.5 projectile reduction, and 1 vigor. And of course, off of the 1 vigor, we're losing 3% HP recovery bonus and 2 HP. In my opinion, move speed is the most important stat here, and we're gaining a crazy amount of it. Losing this PDR, it's not great, but we can make it up in other ways in our kit. And the vigor, it's just 1 stat, it's nothing. The headshot reduction is probably the biggest change here, 5%, but it's not huge. Again, the move speed bonus is just massive, so in my opinion, I'll be running Lizardman. I want that move speed, especially as a cleric. And I think most classes, you will agree. However, before we get into HR gear, one thing to note is certain classes I might not make this choice on. For example, Warlock and Rogue, you have the chance of wearing a Shadow Mask with +2 attributes if you can find it. Obviously the common gear only has 1 attribute, but with 2, I might consider running that instead. You'll have to do this kind of calculation for your class and your gear and see if it's viable for you. Alright, now the juicy bit of the video. Let's go over full gear HR kits. Now I'm only going to talk about epic quality gear with good rolls or better, we're just going to skip over green and blue tier, hope you don't mind. The argument will remain the same. So I've got Lightfoots with additional speed and reduction. We've got leggings with speed and reduction. We've got gloves with tons of damage and armor. We've got a cape with speed and reduction. We've got a Templar with lots of juicy damage stats, and we have a Hound Skull with juicy cleric stats. This stuff doesn't matter because it doesn't show up in the stats page unless we're holding it. So let's compare this with the Lizardman. This is the ultimate test here. Alright, this is where the decisions become a little bit tougher to make. So we're still gaining 13 move speed, which is massive. The MDR remains about the same. However, PDR, we're losing 5.3%. This is because we're kind of at the higher end of the armor curve here, so we're losing about 5.3%. Headshot reduction and projectile remain the same. However, now that we have an epic Hound Skull with good rolls, we're now losing more stats. 2 knowledge, 2 strength, and 3 vigor in this case. I haven't listed all the minor changes this makes, like for example, spellcasting speed goes from 7.3 to 1.3, 6% difference, right? But that's because these stats will change for whatever gear that you have, right? The worse gear that you have, the less of a difference between Lizardman and your gear there will be, right? Lizardman will be better. But if you have really good rolls, especially legendaries, that's when Lizardman becomes less viable in my opinion. However, let's do something to change it up here. Let's take our 13% move speed, or excuse me, 13 move speed, and let's change into something like plate pants, which means we'll lose move speed, but we'll gain other stats here. And let's see what kind of a stat difference we can make with this. Let's alter our build to fit the lizard. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to swap in some heavy boots here with move speed and armor, and we're going to swap in heavy gauntlets, which I normally don't use. The stats here are almost exactly the same as the Hound Skull, and the heavy boots, I mean, we could have gotten a better roll in the resourcefulness, but I don't have time to sit and trade chat. So let's see, is this viable or not? So here's where Lizardman begins to fall off. We still have +3 move speed, we have a little bit of MDR, but our PDR surprisingly is about the same. We're only losing 0.5%. Again, headshot reduction -5%. Projectile reduction is only -1.5, but the stats, this is where Lizardman again struggles. We're losing 7 stats here, and we're gaining 1. Keep in mind the resourcefulness roll could have been like a +2 strength, so we'd only be losing 5 stats here, which kind of makes the gap much smaller. My point here is Lizardman is viable up to about epic quality rolls, and at this point you need to do some like serious gear building and like gear theory crafting here to figure out what is going to be optimal. Lizardman can be viable in some situations at epic quality level, but in others it may not be. A lot of it's going to depend on RNG and what type of rolls that you can get. Basically, my point here is that you need to do the math for your class and see if it's viable. For example, if you're a Slayer fighter, this might be the new meta. So let me do a recap and give you all this information really quick. Alright, so for no gear or starter gear, I would say Lizardman is BiS, best in slot. Now I know we kind of overuse this word in our vocabulary in this community, however, for me, this literally is BiS. Now for poor and common gear, I would say Lizardman is very viable, maybe even extremely viable. The move speed that you can get from it is pretty amazing, and you're really not losing out on any stats, very little stats at this level of gear. Now, for uncommon and rare gear, this is where the rolls begin to matter a lot more. However, I would still say it's very viable. I would be running Lizardman most of the time for most classes. Now, epic gear with good rolls, that's the key. At this point, I would say it's only possibly viable. You're going to have to do some gear theory crafting here and kind of move your stuff around and see if Lizardman can fit for your class. Again, if you're a rogue or warlock, you may want to go Shadow Mask, and there's some other special cases, but if you're like a Slayer fighter, maybe this is still very viable and maybe even the best for you. You're going to have to see. Now, for legendary gear, finally, if you're getting good rolls, which is the key, I would say it's not viable. The kind of stats that you can get on like 4 or 5 different really good stat rolls, it's pretty amazing, and I would say this is where Lizardman falls off. So, one more thing I want to mention to you as a disclaimer. you definitely need to check on this with your class and see if it's viable or not. There are certain gear options that you can have. I mentioned Rogue and Warlock, but there are other things that you may need to consider. So, as a general rule, I'd say Lizardman is very viable all the way up until epic quality. If you have any questions about this video, or you have any things that you found or concerns, or maybe I made a mistake, feel free to make a comment below. If you're the type of person who likes live and long-form content, I'm now live on Twitch and YouTube very often. I multi-stream on both platforms, and afterwards you can find the VODs in case you missed the streams. There are hours of VODs if you enjoy that kind of thing. So, let me know what you all think in the comments below, and as always, enjoy yourself in the dungeons. NotLikeThis, out.